Well, good evening, everyone. Hi, this is John Elsesser. I'm Executive Director at INPEA. Appreciate everyone taking the time to join us this evening, talking about a very important subject, and that's our legislative engagement process. As I kind of scan down the names of folks that are logged on, some of you are veterans, and I think you could probably do this presentation yourself. Just to kind of get a sense of who's out there, and I think I do know, we may have a few other folks joining us, but the numbers will be small, so I really have no problem with folks unmuting their microphones. If you have questions, feel free to use chat if you're more comfortable with that, but also feel free to just unmute your microphone and ask any kind of questions. I want to make sure that this is valuable to you. For those of you, and I'm curious, how many of you have participated in an engagement training before? And if you can use the thumbs up, hopefully we're all Zoom pros by now, but if you can give me some kind of a signal with your thumbs up, usually that's over under the more button, and it gives you some options for, there we go, Patty. Jennifer has not. Thank you. Appreciate that. Scott has not, and Mike has. So we have a couple vets and we have a couple rookies. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the full presentation. We are recording this too. So if you want to share the information with other folks at your school, other people that are on your board, feel free. We will provide that recording to you. Probably either tomorrow or sometime at the end of sometime during next week. And you can see from the title, and I think now that we're started, I am going to go ahead and get rid of my face on the screen as well. Since you're all hiding, I'm going to hide too, so that you can just focus on my PowerPoint presentation. So there we go. You can see from the title, and any of you who are involved in non-public schools know that we had a very successful legislative session in 2021, and we'll be talking more about those successes as we go through the presentation. But really, the emphasis of the presentation is that we can't get comfortable, that we have to build on the momentum from last session, and we'll talk a little bit about the way many of our schools last session between January and March, or January and April of last year, engaged and helped our efforts in ensuring the success that we got by engaging in the legislative process. And that's really what this particular presentation is about. For you folks who have been around a while, I'm seeing if I can get my PowerPoint to move. Here we go. You're probably very familiar with INPEA, but just in case the two folks who have not heard a presentation, just very, very quickly, the Reader's Digest version. INPEA is a membership association, been around since 1974, serves 12 different jurisdictions, which are groups of schools like a Catholic diocese or a Lutheran district, and about 400 schools across the state of Indiana. And we serve our member schools really through the two arms of our organization. We have an advocacy arm. So I am a part-time lobbyist and am heavily involved at the State House during the legislative session. Also work very, very closely with the State Department of Education and helping our schools navigate the programs and the bureaucracy. And we also have a professional development and consultation arm where we do conferences. We just finished our INPEA 2021. We're a little nervous coming out of COVID, but we had over 1,900 folks registered. And that was probably the second highest that we've had in the last 4 to 5 INPEAs. So we were really pleased. And there was just a great energy, people really wanting to get together and needing to get together. So we were very, very pleased. We also do other kind of webinars like this around legislative issues and other general kinds of issues. Heavily involved in some of the COVID protocol conversations, especially in certain areas of the state, by getting information out to our folks or connecting our folks with folks at the various different health departments. But that's just real quick who we are in case you didn't have that information. And one other piece to it, we're considered what's called a state CAPE affiliate. CAPE stands for the Council for American Private Education. And there are national offices in Washington, D.C., and they have just about every type of school around their board table. Kinds of schools that we don't see here much in Indiana, Waldorf schools and Friends schools, as well as the president of the NCEA is on that board, and the president of LCMS or Lutheran schools is on that board. So a hugely diverse group of folks, but who are able to come around and coalesce around a common agenda. And that's what we do at the state level here with our board, with various different types of schools, different faith traditions. But again, we're able to find a common agenda. Hopefully this next question is pretty simple, and we all by now know how important it is here in the state of Indiana, but why do we even engage in this public policy area? In part because it's Indiana, and I've worked in 3 other states, and the interplay, the interaction between public and private is much, much greater here in the state of Indiana than it is in any other state that I've worked. In part because many of our schools are state accredited, and in part because of our choice programs really push that interaction. And you can see here, I think we maybe lost somebody. I'm going to let them back in here. The other reasons we do that, it helps us advance our mission. School choice has allowed non-pubs to bring their mission to a much broader demographic and to more kids. By being at the table, by lobbying, we can protect our independence, which includes our religious liberty for our faith-based schools. Of course, we're advocating for school choice and quality educational options, but it puts us at the table to make sure non-public schools have a voice when legislation or regulation is being created, so we can support those things that benefit our kids, and we can oppose things that could be harmful to our kids or our schools. And most importantly, we engage because it puts a face on the issues. And I'll talk more about this when I talk about how we advocate. But it's just really, really important that people see non-public schools for more than just a concept, a different sector of schooling, or they see school choice from its personal side, not just from the concept of this education reform initiative. So as I alluded to earlier, what a legislative session. The governor has referred to it as transformational, and I do as well. Divine intervention toward the end of the session, where the General Assembly learned through a revenue projection that they were going to bring in about $2 billion more than what they had planned for. And in their wisdom, God bless them, they added $1.9 billion to K-12 education. And that all didn't impact non-public schools, it impacted public schools, charters, and non-public schools. So theoretically, everybody should be happy and shouldn't be concerned about what another sector did or did not do. That doesn't typically happen in the state of Indiana. Still people will have concerns, and still people will say this shouldn't have happened and all of that. But the legislature really pushed the envelope, and the changes that they made in school choice were huge and transformational, but they also significantly impacted the per pupil allocation for our public schools, charter school grants, so that everybody benefited from that windfall of funds that they weren't anticipating. And really the beneficiaries, which you all are well aware, are not schools and not programs, they're families. And we're seeing that here in the state of Indiana already, as we're 3 to 4 months into a school year, in terms of the numbers of families who are really are benefiting. And for those of you that maybe weren't as attuned to what was happening in the session and what the results of the last legislative session, here's what happened in terms of our choice expansions. The income eligibility was increased dramatically to a family of 4 could make up to $147,000. Now, if you're familiar with the voucher program, you have to meet both financial eligibility and what we call track eligibility. So just because someone is financially eligible and they don't meet a track, they still cannot participate in the program. The other huge change was they, instead of a 3-tiered voucher program, which we've had since well, we've had 2 tiers and they added a 3rd. So we had a 50%, which means the family would be eligible for 50% of the state tuition support that would have went to the public school that their child would have attended, or they would have been eligible for 70% based on their income, or they would have been eligible for 90%. The change is that anybody that's voucher eligible gets a 90% voucher, so 90% of what that student would get in IPS or what that student would get in Greater Clark County, wherever that student would attend if they had chosen a public school. We also added a foster child pathway. Historically, foster children have always been immediately financially eligible, but if they didn't meet one of those eligibility tracks, they still weren't able to participate or to benefit from the program. And if you're familiar at all with the academic performance of foster children in the state of Indiana, it's pretty pathetic. And so the legislature recognized that and wanted to remove any obstacles for foster children to be able to have educational choices as well. Not only did the voucher financial eligibility increase, but so did the SGO, the Scholarship Tax Credit Program, increased to 300%. And I just want to point out how dramatic that was, because if you would have applied for a voucher before July 1st, 2021, to get a 90% voucher, your family could not have made more than $48,470. After July 1, you can make $147,072, I think is the exact amount, for a family of 4. Transformational. 47,000 to 147, or 48,000 to 147,000. Huge, huge change. And I think what's significant about that, and I've been in the non-public school business for a long time, I think 40 years now. And we've always done pretty well in taking care of the families who were most needy. Most schools provided tuition assistance, or churches did. Many schools had endowments. We were able to do that. And then when choice came in place, we were phenomenally able to support those who were most needy. But one of the things that I've recognized, and I'm sure anybody who's been leading non-public schools, it's been the struggle for our middle-income families or our upper-middle-income families. You know, they were making all kinds of sacrifices to send their kids to a private school, but they were still struggling to pay tuition. And we were losing some of those families. And really, non-public schools around the country were built on the back of middle-class income families. And so the legislature recognized that and bumped this to where at one point, people would think of the voucher program or the choice scholarship program, which is what it's called in the law, as just for those who are most needy. Now, it is something to kind of help all families be able to direct their tax dollars to the school of their choice. You know, and I think there's some hope down the road that there would not be any financial eligibility cutoff, that all families could take their tax dollars and choose public, charter, or private. I don't know how far we are away from that, but that I'm sure is the goal of some who are true school choice supporters. Not only did the income eligibility increase, but the Scholarship Tax Credit Program has a cap on how many credits they will give away in a fiscal year. So, you know, anybody can make a donation however large they want, and they get a 50% tax credit off their state tax liability. But as that adds up, if it gets to the point, it used to be before July 1st, $16.5 million, and that's for all schools across the state, non-pub schools. But what they did is they added $1 million in the first year of the biennium. So this year it's 17.5 million, and next year it'll be 18.5 million. And that's very important because participating in the SGO program is a track that allows folks to participate in the voucher program if they meet both the financial eligibility and one of the tracks, one of which being the SGO scholarship. It allows them voucher eligibility. There was also increase in state special education funding and English language learners funding in the budget last year. And depending if a non-public school provides the special education services for a student participating in a choice scholarship program who has special needs, they can receive additional funding on top of the the tuition support, base tuition support, which will be the base voucher amount. And there was also the establishment of a new program called an educational scholarship account. And I probably could spend the entire evening just explaining that program. It does not go into effect until 22-23, next school year. And it's being run under the auspices of the state's treasurer's office. And there's some things about the program that we like, and there's a number of things about the program that we aren't happy with. And so we've been working very closely and partnering with the state treasurer's office to try to get this program more aligned where non-public schools will want to participate, that there's some value add for non-public schools to participate in the program. And initially, this first year, it will only be available to students with special needs. And so there's the potential, if this non-public school is the service provider, they would receive both the voucher amount and the state special education dollar amount, APC dollars, they call it. So we're working on the details of that. There's going to be a lot more information coming out. We're hoping to do some information sessions for school leaders, and then later down the road, information sessions for parents so they're aware. You know, I think some legislators are hoping that this program will expand significantly beyond just students with special needs, potentially maybe even replacing the voucher program somewhere down the road so that all families would have an ESA. That's a long way down the road and has to go through some significant legislative process, but at least what we're hearing from folks at the treasurer's office, they're assuming that's the direction that some folks would like to go. You know, one of the things that I have preached through these kind of trainings and when I meet with principals is just the importance of all schools owning their responsibility to engage in a legislative process. You saw the kind of families this year, and I can't remember if I have that in a slide. There are about 44,000 kids participating, and I do have it in a slide coming up. So there's significant things at stake for us to engage. And even though we had a very successful session, I can guarantee you that the battle is never over and that there will be opponents in the upcoming session trying to find things wrong with the program. Sorry, my slides are not advancing again for me. There we go. Sorry about that. Last year was one of the best years we ever had with our schools engaging in the legislative process. Principals really owned it. I think they saw what the potential legislation could provide their families. I think they also were very attuned to the negative stuff that was being said in the media and from different public school corporations who were passing school board resolutions against the expansion of the program and just saying a lot of negative things. Many things were not factual. And so folks really got motivated this year. I was extremely pleased. They contacted their legislators. Some folks hosted town halls. The Lafayette area hosted a virtual town hall with all of their area legislators, with parents. And it was just a great interchange. And our schools up in Lafayette in particular, to a certain extent up in Fort Wayne, have really been best practices in terms of the various different non-pubs coming together. The Catholics, the Lutherans, the Christians, they all have come together in a network to work together to advocate for these programs. And we're hoping we can replicate that in other areas around the state. We had some principals creating videos to send to legislators. You know, one of my favorite came from St. Mark's, a Catholic school here in the south side of Indianapolis, where the principal just walked around with his iPad or tablet telling the story of school choice. That school has a significant number of Burmese families, and told the story of a young lady who came to them initially on a voucher, could not speak English, ended up graduating and going to Roncalli High School, and then went to Marian University, and now she's in med school. You know, one of the many, many, many success stories that school choice has provided for families and for individuals. We've also had folks come down and testify at the State House. There's opportunities when committees meet on particular pieces of legislation that parents, school leaders can come in and talk about the importance of that legislation to their families or to their schools. You know, a huge thing is being able to tell stories. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I always say one of the best tools in your advocacy tool belt is putting a face on the issue. And last session, we had folks help us identify families whose lives have been impacted. And I've heard many of these stories as I travel around the state. I've heard principals tell me about people in their office in tears because they never thought they'd have an opportunity to go to a private school, let alone a faith-based private school. And, you know, it's easy for our opponents to be very negative and vociferous against a concept or a program, you know, negative about non-pubs, negative about school choice. But if you put a face on the issue, and we talk about the Jones family whose father passed away last year, the mother's working 3 jobs, have 5 kids that they're trying to educate, it changes the tenor of the debate significantly. And if those families are willing, and we help them tell their story, whether they want to tell it in writing, whether they want to talk to a legislator, whether they're comfortable even talking to the media, which we prepare them to do. We need folks because we don't know those families. We're too distant from that. And that's why we have to lean on our school leaders to help us identify folks that are comfortable. Some may not be, some may be willing because of the impact the programs have. And you can also meet with your legislators when they come back in their districts. A lot of legislators have what they call third house meetings, where they usually 2 or 3 legislators do it together, talk about particular issues. And you can always be pretty sure that there will be opponents to choice there that will be loud. And it's just important that we're able to counterbalance that with the good news of the programs as well. And this is what I say all the time, this engagement's a must. The battle's never over, and everybody has to do something. Everybody has to own their responsibility because there's a lot at stake. This kind of gives you the chronology of the program. The choice program, choice scholarship program, voucher, was passed in 2011. That first year program, we had 3,919 kids benefiting. That was the largest first year program ever in the country. And as you scan down, you can see the dollar figures and the number of students. Last year, because of COVID, our numbers were down slightly, 35,698, but $171 million went to families to be able to choose the private school of their choice. And you can see the bump this year because of the expansion of the voucher program, 43,935. And we don't have the financial figures yet, but you can be guaranteed it's going to be significantly more than $171 million. Huge, huge. And these 43,000, almost 44,000 kids are counting on all of us to protect this, not only for them, but for their little brothers and sisters, or maybe even for their children's ability to take advantage of these programs. And that's why advocacy is so important. That's just the voucher program. If you look at the tax credit program, the scholarship, the SGO, last year, 9,000, almost 9,500 kids got a tax credit scholarship in the amount of $22 million. Add that 22 million to probably, you know, close to 180. We're up to about $200 million. And please note how I phrase this, because messaging is important. I didn't say $171 million went to private schools. I said $171 million went to families to be able to attend a private school of their choice. This program was not designed to benefit schools, was not to help schools, faith-based schools evangelize or catechize. That's a side benefit. That's an indirect benefit. It was to give families opportunities to choose a school that they may not otherwise be able to do. So we all have to own it. We have to have a unified, responsive, loud voice. It's got to be a school priority. It's got to be an individual priority for every stakeholder. Because, and I'll probably say this again and again, because in the legislative world, in the arena of public policy, numbers count. So whether it's letters or emails or phone calls, you may not talk to the representative. He may not read, or she may not read your letter or your email, but I can guarantee you their legislative assistant will count and say, you had 50 emails, you had 100 emails today in support of this particular thing or in opposition to this. And it's important even for our supporters who are legislators to be able to say, even though they're hearing from the other side, that they're hearing from our side as well. And we ask folks very simply to do two things as a school: that you appoint a legislative liaison. That's our local grassroots coordinator. And I'll talk a lot more about that person and their role here in just a second. And we ask every school to set 2 public policy goals. Doesn't have to be rocket science. It can be simple. Could be things like inviting legislators into your building so they can see the face on the issue, so they can see your school in action and the quality of education and formation that's going on in your school. That way they have a visual when they're pushing their vote button in one of the House or the Senate chamber. Increase in encouraging your families to contact their elected representatives. And really helping to get information out to your school community about legislation, about key strategic times when legislators need to hear from our stakeholders. Find those families that are willing to tell their story. Help us to put a face on the issue. If you know folks that are willing to do that, I'll have my email up at the end of the presentation. Send me an email. If you can contact them and say, are you willing to do this? I'm sure we'll follow up with them, but probably want to make sure they're comfortable before providing information to us. But that can be invaluable. And that's, you know, there's the faces. This is what provides the motivation to go fight the battles at the State House, because these folks are the folks who are the beneficiaries. So I've talked about this legislative liaison, who, like I said, is really our grassroots contact. And what I've been in my role here at INPEA, I'll be hitting 14 years here in a few months. And when I came, everything went to the principal's desk. And I've been a principal, and I know there are days when I can't think about anything legislatively. I may have 3 kids in my office, you know, teachers who need to see me after school, X number of parents I have to call back. And so it can't always be a front burner issue. And that's why we typically ask that legislative liaison be someone other than the principal. Principal's always engaged and involved, but this person can take kind of the legwork off of the plate of the principal, who already has way too much to try to navigate and do. So this helps us build a grassroots network so that when we need to mobilize folks, it's in place and ready to engage. So this helps us raise our collective voice. So it's not just the Catholic schools talking, it's not just the Lutheran schools talking, it's the collective non-public school community voicing concern or support for certain legislative issues and legislation. The liaison can help educate and engage and mobilize your community. And we can talk about specific ways to do that, in terms of even setting goals. I think it is important to make sure your community is educated on the issues, because they're not puppets. And so when we want them to respond, we want them to be knowledgeable about why we're asking them to respond and be knowledgeable about the issues. And so I encourage schools to think of things like having a public policy update at your board meeting, or at your homeschool or parent teacher, whatever you call that organization in your school, having some type of column in your electronic or print newsletters that kind of just gets blurbs of information out to your parents so that they understand what the issues are. Put the link to INPEA's website on your website, because we have a legislative action center, which I'll talk about in a minute, where it makes it very easy and user-friendly for people to reach out to their elected representatives. So that way we're ready to support new initiatives, but we also, which is very important going into this legislative session, is to protect our past successes. I had a superintendent say, John, I keep hearing you talk about legislative liaisons. What's the job description? And this is basically what I prepared for that superintendent. And this is the narrative summary part of the job description, I guess. Legislative liaisons, they're our conduit between our policy initiatives and your school community. And they work with the school administration to liaison and help keep parents and teachers and other school and church community members aware of legislation that could impact our schools. So they're kind of like the grassroots coordinator, and they help us engage your community at strategic times when our legislators need to hear from us. This is an extreme example, but it's something I just to make a point. If there was a bill being heard, it said, that choice schools aren't allowed to pray during school hours. That would be huge, because most of our schools, non-pubs in general in the state, but those that participate in the choice program are faith-based, and that's essential to their mission. And one of the things that we've always fought for is that, yes, we're going to do some things that we really don't want to do from the state's perspective, like the state test and state reports, but don't mess with our mission. And so we usually would only have maybe 48 hours or something like that when we know this is going to be heard in a committee. So we have to be able to mobilize people very quickly. That's why it's important to have the infrastructure in place. And this just gives you examples of their roles and responsibilities. As I said, they can help educate your community, newsletters, parent meetings, board meetings, encourage folks to get involved, whether that's coming down to the State House or local rallies, or if even it's just getting people to write and reach out to their representatives. Because we need to share that private school perspective, and we need to do it somehow, whether that's writing, emailing, calling, or meeting with those folks personally. The more personal the contact is always the better. We have a generic email that you can send, which they'll count that number. But if you send a personal letter, it's going to have more impact. Or if you call a legislator, that'll have more impact. Or if you meet with them face to face, whether it's back when they're in their home district, or whether that's at the State House, that can have the most. And I think the bottom line is, please do something. Work with your administration to set school goals, those 2 public policy goals, and develop a way that how you get the communication out. If we send an alert and said they're voting on this in 2 days, we need your people to reach out. How does that work at your particular school? Does the liaison work with your school secretary to send out an email, a blanket email? Does it go into a newsletter if the timing works right? How did that work? And you need to have those things in place up front. If you've seen my engagement presentation, Patty, don't laugh at my rudimentary PowerPoint skills, but I always share these because I'm a visual learner, and it's just an easy way to kind of point out what happens. So when we talk about the legislative liaison, you can see they're in the middle. They're the liaison, the conduit between me running around like a crazy nut at the State House and your school. And what happens is we send out an alert. It'll go to the legislative liaisons. It'll also go to the school heads. with the intent that they get that out to your school community and your families. But if it stops there, we weren't accomplishing much, because we need those families to reach back out to their elected representatives. And that's what we call advocacy. And there's a number of times during the legislative session where usually it's where we want people, legislators, to hear from our folks. But starting out with needing to know who your elected representatives are. And you can get that off of our website. You can get it off the Indiana General Assembly website if you don't know. And if your elected representatives are on one of 4 key committees, then you have an even more special voice. If you know these people personally, you even have a more special voice. But if your elected representative, because they listen to their constituents first, and those 4 committees are the House Education Committee, the Senate Education Committee, the House Ways and Means Committee, that's where the budget starts and comes from, and the Senate Appropriations Committee, and that's who does the budget on the Senate side. Those 4 committees are the most powerful from our perspective. There's a few other committees that get involved in education stuff periodically, not very often, but those 4 committees, and if you have a relationship or are a constituent of any of those committee members, then we need you. And we need everybody, but we need you in particular. If you'd like, you can come and testify at committee hearings. We help prep people. We don't throw people out there without holding your hand or helping you go through that. But they love hearing from, constituents. And it's very evident for somebody sat in those committee hearings as much as I have. When you get up and you're someone like me who testifies on lots of bills, who's there almost all of these committee hearings, they hear from us all the time. But it's interesting to see if a parent comes in or a school leader, they put their cell phones away, they close their laptops, and they listen, because they realize you're there because this impacts your life. You're not a lobbyist. You're a person who's this legislation is going to positively or negatively impact. So encourage you, or for you to encourage others. We can use your help when there's key legislation being heard. That also, when a bill is introduced and it's has the author works with the Legislative Service Agency and they draft a bill, it almost never looks like the original bill when it's passed and signed by the governor. It goes through lots of changes through the process. And one of the ways that it's changed is through amendments. You can amend a bill in committee, or you can amend the bill on the floor. And a lot of times amendments can be really problematic, because we may have a great bill, something that we're really very happy with, and people who aren't happy with it try to put things in the bill that would make it less palatable or less impactful. And so we always have to excuse me, I had a telephone ring in my office here. We always have to be watching those amendments and reading those amendments, and that may be a time when we need to contact certain representatives as well. And then when it's voted on, once it gets through the committee process, it goes to the House floor or the Senate floor for what they call second reading amendments. That's where they can amend it there. Then third reading is when they vote on the bill in its entirety. Once it passes out of one house, it goes to the other house. So if it starts in the Senate, it passes out of the Senate, it goes to the House in the second half of the session. And if they come up with different end results, they have to go into a conference committee and resolve the differences. You can visit your state house, to talk to your representative, or as I said earlier, you can talk to them when they're back at home. And I mentioned earlier, we have a legislative action center on our website, which whenever an alert goes out, we will have a frame, a message in there, and you can simply just go in and put your zip code in. It'll tell you who your legislators are, and you can click sign and it'll send it. Or you can personalize it and tell your own part of the story, leave some of what we craft, but add your own part, which makes it even more impactful. Or you can write your own message completely if you'd like to do that. Or you can write a letter and send it snail mail. You know, a lot of times if they get lots of emails that look exactly the same, they still count them, but it doesn't have the same impact as something that's much more personal. So the intent with the Legislative Action Center is just to make things easy for folks. So we're right now heavy in the midst in gearing up for the next legislative session, which will start in January. Yesterday was organization day. So all the legislators were at the State House yesterday, and I stopped down for a while myself. And just kind of for ceremonial type things, really. But the Speaker of the House gave his kind of state of what he's hoping to accomplish in the upcoming session. And he did reference the choice improvements and the hope for growing those choice improvements in the upcoming session. Now, Indiana budgets every other year, and this is not a budget year. And I just realized that not exactly what's saying on top of that slide. So excuse me, 2021 was a budget year when we passed all of these significant expansions to the voucher. But going into the 2022 session, where it's not a budget year, we'll be focused on protecting and defending, which is always our #1 priority, not allowing them to take away or mess up things that we've successfully passed in prior sessions. And protect and defend speaks to things like our choice programs for sure, as well as just protecting religious liberty. Just because a religious-based, faith-based school is participating in state programs doesn't mean they give up their mission. And the state should not be interjecting themselves into that mission. And that's one of the things that we're always highly focused on. I mentioned earlier the Educational Scholarship Account program that will go into effect 22-23. And we've been working, as I said earlier, with the Treasurer's Office on trying to fix some things that really don't play well for non-public schools. And we're hoping that some of those that require legislative changes will occur in this session so that they're even in place as the program's being rolled out in the spring. We tried last year, and we will continue to try to clarify what fees are allowable for voucher reimbursement. We've had some disagreements with the department on this issue, and the attorneys at the department believe it needs some legislative change, and whether that'll be able to happen during a non-budget year, we'll have to see, but it's going to be on our radar, if not this year, then the following year. One of the things that's always a priority of mine, and it is a challenge to try to make progress in that area. Because of state accreditation, because of school choice, there is huge administrative burden on our schools, and in particular on our school leaders. And I like to tell folks at the department and our legislators that our principals are drowning in administrative stuff that they have to do for the state. Some of that's not going to go away, but I think there are ways that we can make that better, because we've got a lot of wonderful school leaders out there and we want to keep them. But if we keep piling on more things to their to-do list, and a lot of it has very little to do with instruction and improving instruction and working with kids and teachers, that's just not right. So it continues to be a priority. People get the message, but it's easier said than done, but we're going to continue working at it. There's also some training funds out there for things like dual credit for our high schools. There's requirements are changing for who's allowed to teach dual credit courses coming up in 2023. And there's some funds out there, but currently they're not available to non-public school teachers. And we're going to try to address that. Again, that may not be a non-budget item, but we'll see as we move forward. I mentioned earlier, how we talk. It's one thing to understand school choice and how it works. It's another thing to learn how to talk about it. And I always caution our folks is that we don't talk about it from the benefit of a school perspective, because it wasn't designed to benefit schools. And that's one of the things that, opponents will pick up on. This is just helping religion. And that's why our focus is always on speaking to the benefit of families. not to the benefit of schools. So keep that in mind. What we typically will do is if there's kind of a hot button issue out there, we'll send messaging points out to school leaders about here's some ways to talk about that in case the media would reach out to you. So, the kind of the moral of the story is we have to be engaged in an ongoing way. It's not an event. It's not a one-shot deal. We have to be continuously engaged throughout the legislative session, but also just throughout the school year. You don't have to be in a legislative session to invite legislators into your building. As a matter of fact, it's even better when they're not in session. They have more availability. We can work and train parents when we're not in a legislative session as well. So we just need to make sure that our school leaders, our school boards and commissions, and our families and parents, and those who just believe in our mission, all understand the importance of engaging. That's why we have a representative government. And I can guarantee you that those that don't like the programs that benefit our kids will be loud. And it's important that we're able to be almost as loud in terms of our support of our kids in our schools. And here's why we do it. This is what gets me up in the morning, because we're impacting lives. That's one of the benefits of my job is I get to travel all over the state and hear the stories and know what we do on a daily basis is not only impacting kids, but it's impacting their entire families. Any questions or discussion about the advocacy side, or while I'm on the Zoom with you, and I know there's some school leaders on here, if you have other questions about other items that INPEA engages in, whether it's EANS or other kinds of state or federal related issues. But if you have questions, feel free to unmute your microphone. There's my contact information. And I always encourage folks, I don't know if you're a Twitter person or not. I wasn't until I came into this position. And we use Twitter as a real-time way of communicating with stakeholders. We send out a monthly newsletter, and we try not to send out all kinds of emails in between that because we know how full email boxes get. So one way to get ongoing real-time information is by following us on Twitter. That first at INPEA John is my Twitter account, and at INPEA_voice is INPEA communication. And that particular Twitter, there's a lot more tweeting that goes on there and broad-based education issues. Most of my stuff is real-time stuff from the State House or State Board meeting. And our communications person always retweets my stuff anyhow, but I would encourage you. And also feel free to visit our website. There are stories on there, there are resources on there to provide information as well. So with that, I'm going to be quiet and see, I don't see anything right now in chat, but if you want to unmute your microphone, you feel free to do so. And
Hey, John, this is Scott Kovach. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you broke up there for a minute, but now I can hear you fine.
Sorry. Hey, so John, thank you for your presentation tonight. I am the new principal at Queen of Peace School in Mishawaka, and there's a couple of our teachers are also on this call. What are some key dates coming up? Is there anything coming up in December or January that you think we need to be aware of?
And are you speaking specifically legislatively, or are you thinking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
There probably will be some other training opportunities that are available. One of the things that we typically do, and right now I am down a staff person, and I lost my communication person, so a couple things are a little behind. But we also do a board engagement video that we encourage our schools to share with your boards or commissions, because a lot of times our board folks may even know legislators. But the session will begin January 3rd. That's when things really start to happen. In the meantime, I'd encourage you to, look and know who your legislators are. And I'm not sure if Mishawaka's in his area, but the Senate Appropriations Chair is from up in that area. His kids go to, his son goes to Marion High School. And, he is hugely influential in the budgetary process, and has sometimes not been quite as supportive of our choice issues. It ends up, where he is, and that's Ryan Mishler.
Yes. Okay.
And he's huge. He's the Senate Appropriations Chair, and we struggle sometimes in the Senate. The House side is typically more friendly in promoting non-public friendly issues, in particular school choice. Speaker of the House Ways and Means Committee Chair, they're all very friendly. But sometimes, and up in that general South Bend area, we have legislators that, Dale Devon is usually supportive. I'm trying to think, there's a couple Democrats up there that have not been supportive. So kind of getting to know your folks and who they are. And once, you can feel free to reach out to me, and I can, or you can get on our website or on the Indiana General Assembly website and kind of look at, who those folks are. But any relationship building you can do with your folks prior to session can be very, very valuable.
Okay.
The other thing that we've not done, and up in that area would be an ideal place to start. And that's looking at gathering folks. The Fort Wayne area, does a rally periodically where they bring together all the non-pubs in their area, and basically just talk about the good news of non-public school education and the choice program. And like I said, they do something similar down in Lafayette, and South Bend area would be another, great opportunity. And if you all are interested in something like that, I would be more than willing to work with you to coordinate amongst all the schools in the area, to pull something off like that.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in that, John. And I also want to give a shout out to one of our board members. I see he was able to get on the call tonight. So I'm really glad that Mike was able to get on the call as well.
Awesome.
Been very, very helpful. Good
bonus
information.
Points.
Exactly. Exactly. So thank you, John.
Yep. Any other questions, comments? Well, my contact information is here. Feel free, whether teacher, board member, school leader, if you think of questions or have questions or something comes up and you're just trying to understand, don't hesitate to reach out or to call. And if you are interested in helping to kind of organize kind of a, a rally or a gathering up in your area, let me know, and I can get, others who are, choice supporters and others that will be willing to kind of help and pitch in to kind of help organize something as well. Great. You could be one of your public policy goals right there. Anything else? And I'm probably keeping you from dinner, so I don't want to keep you longer than necessary. But I do appreciate everyone gathering on the call. I know this is kind of busy time and we're in the evening now when it gets dark so early, but this is really important stuff. We've got lots of kids in schools that are in schools, according to our state Supreme Court, are indirect beneficiaries. Our families are direct beneficiaries, but it's just so important that everybody understands the issues and engages by reaching out to their elected representatives. And that's what this is all about. If you don't have a legislative liaison in place, this PowerPoint can kind of help them, and we can send out a recording and a PowerPoint, as well, or you can have them reach out to me too if you find someone that's willing to take on that responsibility. But with that said, I hope everyone has a blessed Thanksgiving next week and you get some time off for a little bit of rest and relaxation. I'm hoping to as well. And looking forward to working with you all in the upcoming legislative session. So take care, everybody. God bless.